thoughts and their morals and their ethics into the right words such that they can be armed appropriately. We need to arm the true believers. That's great in a lot of ways, but that's not the only audience. Another audience are persuadables, people who are not with us but have openness to our message. The world is filled with persuadables, and talking to them is quite different than talking to true believers. You know, if you talk to, in the United States, a group of persuadables who are not with us, and you denigrate the ethics, fundamentally, of people on the left, you've lost the persuadables because you're talking to the true believers. The third group are the hostiles. There are hostile people around us as well. Would we ever have messages from a hostile? Of course. Confront hostiles constantly. One of the best ways to meet persuadables, incidentally, is by confronting hostiles with the truth and answering them with love. This is what we found in most of our debate training. This is what we found in most of our campus programs. There's talking to hostiles overtly and talking to them in a spirit of brotherhood where they're expecting us to come to them with anger and hostility and invective and insults. Hostiles is number 3. The last are apathetics. Most of the world are apathetics when it comes to the truth of the free enterprise system, when it comes to the truth of our worldview and how it helps people. It's very hard to engage and mobilize apathetics, but indeed that's what we're trying to do when we work in the mass media. That's what we hope people will come across, that they'll happen across. But the answer to this question, what is our work trying to do? Reach true believers, reach persuadables, reach hostiles, or reach apathetics. And the last question is, what's your product? I'm not talking about products in books or articles or events. I'm asking you to answer the following question. Is our product persuasion, power, or propaganda? Most think tanks fall into one of those 3 categories. For us, the best by far is persuasion. I'll leave it to you to decide which is best for you. Thank you.
Parth.
As when John told me that I was supposed to speak about 3 different learnings that we had in working as a think tank. My observations are largely going to be about what I have done in India, and having been trained in the US with my PhD degree here, and then working with many of the think tanks in the US before going back to India. I sort of contrast what my understanding was when I was here in terms of what I would do when I went back to India, and then what I actually ended up doing there. Right? So this is a learning that I had, which may be of interest to people who are working outside US or outside Anglo-Saxon sort of intellectual milieu. So the first learning I had was the adapt the think tank model to the local environment and challenges. When I was here, I understood think tank work being writing and speaking. So you write and speak in seminars, in media, at congressional briefings, what have you made? But largely the work involves writing and speaking. The first thing I learned in India that that's not how we are going to be able to win hearts and minds of the people. Because people always ask, what's the proof of your idea? And that sort of forced us to begin to do pilot programs in India. So for example, when we launched the school choice campaign, we talked about school vouchers. People said, yes, it makes sense logically, but how would it work in India? We ran a sort of school voucher program in Delhi. So that's one part of the work that we need to do. Second thing, also incubate other ideas and organizations. So we have several ideas, several organizations we have incubated, which slowly will become independent as they grow, and thereby multiply the impact that we could have. The third thing we have done is the capacity building of government officers. Something I think we would never think about here in the US. Working with the government officers to understand what the laws are, how to implement those laws better and more effectively. That's the kind of work that it sort of separates from a typical think tank to what we have been doing in India. And that's my larger message, is to figure out how to adapt the think tank model, how to make it think tank plus in a sense for what you do in your own country. The second one was about adapting the language and the idiom. The language is, for example, we speak about economic freedom. Right? When I began to talk about economic freedom in India, people would ask or assume that it means freedom for the people who have economic needs, which is for the richer people that we are talking about. We simply change that from economic freedom to livelihood freedom. And suddenly people begin to associate that with the people who struggle to earn a living for themselves. And now we are talking about their freedom to earn a living. Right? Dramatic change in how people associate and relate to us for our work. Similarly, I also found the use of the word or phrase limited government did not make any sense. Of course, it doesn't make sense among us also. There are different interpretations of what a limited government is. I found the word or phrase or idea of subsidiarity as an important way to start a conversation. So whatever we can do as people is being allowed to do first, then what we cannot do even to the government and so on. That argument I found was a way to open a dialogue as opposed to closing it. Because when you say I believe in limited government, people simply ask you, oh, will you be opposed to government doing this? And of course, very difficult to say no, because that has very different implications in terms of who you are and who you care for. So I think adapting the language and idiom to local culture, local sort of challenges is a much more important sort of learning that I had. And the third, I think that's true for me in India, that we have to create our own soldiers to fight the battle, because there are very few places where we find people who believe in these ideas. The academia is rather apathetic or antithetical to our ideas. We're not going to find people coming out of colleges. And therefore, working with the youth of the country, I found was very rewarding. Something that Marty Zupan does here as an organization, we have been doing from the day one in India, trying to cultivate people, expose them to libertarian ideas, and see how we can engage them. Many of them have come to work at CCS with me after they have gone through the programs. So the three sort of basic learnings that I had in terms of work that I have done in India.
Thank you. Marty.
I'm glad I came after Parth and after he just said what he said. Many years ago at Mount Tolerant Society in London, your hometown, John, Parth was on the podium and he said, I went back to India to create Cato India, and I discovered that first I had to create IHS India. And the point is that there wasn't the talent there to populate a Cato Institute right away. So as John pointed out in his introductory remarks, the Institute for Humane Studies is not a think tank. We are a market-oriented nonprofit organization. And I hope that what I've learned leading this organization and what I can convey is generally of help to that kind of organization, not just to the kind that does what IHS does. So my first pointer is don't follow the money. And what I mean, of course, to be successful, you must all raise funds from Friends of Freedom to be able to do what you do. So in some sense, you do have to follow the money. But what I mean by the advice of don't follow the money is that I believe that one of the keys to success is not to be tempted to take on something or to continue doing something just because funding is available. And it's a huge temptation. Resources are scarce. I don't know how many times someone has come to IHS and said, I have a great idea, this needs to be done, I will fund this, you could do this, please do this. And it doesn't sync up with our mission and our strategy. It's not what we should be doing. You know how hard it is to say no to that? It's especially tempting if the person's idea is something that actually does need to be done. They're filling a gap in the freedom movement, right? And you can see the value of it. But still, you have to ask yourself, does this accord with our mission and our strategy, our capabilities? Because if it doesn't and you start doing that, you will lose your focus and you will not be as effective. So don't fall for it. Second is be prepared to do creative destruction. We all laud creative destruction in the free enterprise system. Be prepared to do it in your own organization. Very good piece of advice I got early on was from a business person who was a funder, get your team together and ask yourselves periodically, what's the least valuable thing you're doing? What's the least valuable thing you're doing? And when you've answered that question, then ask yourselves, what's the next most valuable thing we could be doing? Now that next most valuable thing might be expanding an existing thing that you're doing, or it might be trying something completely new. But then the third question is, should you make that trade, right? So asking all three of those questions, you may still conclude that the least valuable thing you're doing is the next most valuable thing you could be doing. And you may not, and then you need to do the creative destruction. So that's why I say be prepared to do the creative destruction and then do it, because sometimes it's hard to actually do that creative destruction. I found that that exercise is a great discipline. Third, be a friend. Treat your allies in the movement as allies, not competitors. Keep your eyes on the goal, and part of your challenge as helping allies be effective in reaching that goal, which of course we share that goal in many respects across our organizations. We read a book in our organization probably 5 or 6 years ago called Forces for Good, which two social scientists did a kind of case study approach looking at different organizations, from social service organizations to, really, I'm out of, okay, I'll wind this up quickly. So we were already oriented that way, but we adopted a very explicit, what we call a network-centric focus. And so we think about how we can help our allies who are working for the same goals be effective, now within reason. You know, we're not going to be sharing, giving our resources, giving our funding to them necessarily. But so that's my last piece of advice. Be friends to your allies. You will be more successful than you do.
Thank you.